Friends, what is going on? How are you? My name is James Robilotta, and this is Diner Talks with James. I'm James. Super excited to have you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I encourage you to tune in and do me a favor. If you can, if I sound okay to you, can you do me a favor? I've been trying to play with the sound a little bit. If I sound okay to you, do me a favor and give me a thumbs up or smash that heart button just so I know that this sounds good. I would greatly appreciate that. I would greatly appreciate that for sure. So y'all, let me know what's going on. Let me know what's going on and how it sounds good. Thank you, Dan Fail. I appreciate you. Sounds good. Dan Fail in the house. Jump for joy. So, my friends, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who are piling in right now. My friends, we are in an important time in history, and so I'm excited. I'm excited that you are here to be with me, to learn, to talk, to ask, and to seek. And so I am pumped that you are here. Tonight on the show is my man, Rick Daniels, and I'm going to bring him out in just a little bit, and I'm super excited for you all to talk with him. He is actively chasing a PhD right now, and is a higher ed professional, incredible public speaker, and just a great man and a dear friend. I've eaten a lot of great meals at his house while his kids clung on to me. So I love it. But alas, let's get this show kicked off the way we always do with a top three. And let me know where you're from. Let me know where you're calling in from as well. Put that in the comments just so I know, so I can shout you out. So, top three, a little bit different this year. I didn't take your recommendations, or this year. By this year, I mean this week. I just came up with my own thing. So top three, let's go. Number one, top three books I will read so that I can be better. Top three books that I will read so that I can be better. First off, number one is a classic book. If you are just entering the journey, if you are just entering the conversation that's been happening for a while about race relations and about your own identity and whatnot, there's a really popular book that I've never read and I need to read. It's literally called Why Do All the Black People Sit Together in the Cafeteria? It's by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, and so these are books that I will read. Thank you, Scott. That I will read. These are not books that I have read. They're books that I need to read and I'm excited to read. So first off, Why Do All the Black People Sit Together in the Cafeteria? Number two is White Fragility. White Fragility. It is by Robin DiAngelo. It's by Robin DiAngelo. Brittany, you have read that book. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. So, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a book that is on my now must-read list. And last but not least, is White Like Me. It's by a gentleman by the name of Tim Wise. I want to hear some different perspectives. So Tim Wise wrote a book. I've got to hear him speak. He is a powerful speaker, but I'm excited to read his book, White Like Me. So again, those three books that I will now read, I encourage you to as well if you have not, are Why Do All the Black People Sit Together in the Cafeteria, White Fragility, and White Like Me. I love it. Dan Fail wants to do some accountability reading. I'm into that, brother. Let's buy these books from some black-owned bookstores, and let's go. I got a list. Happy to send it to you if you'd like. Next up, the top three recent albums by black people that you should listen to. The top three recent albums by black people that you should listen to given our times right now particularly. Number one, I'm a huge fan of anything by Killer Mike. And Run the Jewels has been putting out some really powerful work lately. They just came out with Run the Jewels 4 or RTJ4 and incredible hip-hop with some really candid storytelling. I'm sure you've seen Killer Mike do a number of things on TV. He's been interviewed a number of times. He's an outrageous speaker. There's part of me that wishes he would change his name, but that's only because I know that white fragility is real and not everybody is ready to talk to somebody named Killer Mike. But I also respect the hell out of him for that being his name. I just think that his message is powerful, and if you're immediately turned off by him, that's a shame because he's got really cool things to say. Next, Beyonce's Lemonade. In particular, Beyonce's Lemonade, I would encourage you to watch the live performance of it. It is beautiful black art at its finest, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is powerful. Give me a drum line any day, but more importantly, give me lyrics that make me think, that make me think about who I am and the experiences of other people any day. Beyonce's Lemonade. And last but not least is Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly is an outrageous album. Outrageous album that definitely illuminated a lot of things for me. I think it will for you. If you don't like hip hop, I encourage you to listen to it anyway because the words are what matter. The words are what matter. And so make sure that you check some of those out. They're really powerful. And friends, those are recent albums. Like those are all came out within the last four years, maybe something like that, 4 or 5 years. I'm not entirely sure when To Pimp a Butterfly came out, maybe 6 years ago. But either way, we could go all the way back. We could go all the way back to important artists, your Marvin Gaye, Richie Havens, Nina Simone, right? And we could listen to songs about strange fruit and understand what exactly she was talking about. And so there's a lot of incredible artists that have been delivering messages to us that we've been bobbing our heads to and turning up in our cars, but we haven't necessarily been paying attention to the lyrics. And I say we during this entire conversation because that is also something that I know I do. I love hip hop's energy. I don't always pay attention to the lyrics, and that's on me. Top three, that's 2. Last one, top three. The top 3 worst responses. The top 3 worst responses you can say to the protests. Here we go. Number 3 is, I feel bad for Target. I just feel bad for Target. Target's going to be all right, y'all. They're going to be just fine. Trust and believe. Trust and believe that. Next, the top 3. The next worst thing you could say is, I support good cops. I support good cops. Here's the thing, friends. I also support good cops. Okay? I support good people doing the right thing. That's what I support, right? And so a lot of people who say, I support good cops, let us be careful at how we are defining good cop. Because I have a lot of great cops in my family that did the right thing time and time again, as far as I know, because those are the stories that have been passed on to me. I don't know if I've heard them all, but what I would say is that a good cop, yes, ideally, is not racist. A good cop has been through some sort of social justice training, has been through a repeated awareness training so they can own who they are, so they know how they can show up into different spaces. A good cop is also someone who stops their brother or sister on the force from going too far. And that is something that I don't think we currently train cops on. And so there's a lot of really powerful stuff. I know the NAACP has been really working on a lot of that kind of stuff and making sure that we are getting these police records to be more public so that we know who's got complaints against them and who doesn't. Those are really powerful directions at the end the NAACP is trying to move in. So those are my top 2. And the third one, the worst thing that you can say to response to the protest is, all lives matter. All lives matter. Let's get this out on the table right now. You're right. All lives do matter. Congratulations. We're all beautiful snowflakes in this world, in this snow globe of happiness. And that's lovely, right? That is lovely. But the fact of the matter is, the analogy that's been going around that I love, that's going around is, if one house is on fire on the block, the fire trucks don't show up to every house on the block and douse them all with water, my friends. Okay, so let us thinking about what we mean when we say all lives matter. It is insensitive, inappropriate, and it's just a little bit tone deaf right now. You've got to see a little bit bigger and a little bit deeper. My friends, those are tonight's top 3. I'm curious, have you read any books? Have you read any books that you have really loved? If so, I'd love to hear some of your book recommendations. If there is an artist or an album that sticks out to you that's like, hey, I think people should listen to this album because it made me think a little bit, I encourage you, please put that in the comments, put that in the show notes, let me know in a review or something like that. What are some ideas that you have that other people can do right now to continue to learn? Put them in the comments, please. I'd love to hear them just because I think it would be really powerful. So, Thank you, my friends. I appreciate you tuning in for tonight's Top 3. Let's get into tonight's episode. My guest tonight is the one and only Rick Daniels. Rick and I have known each other for a number of years, approximately 10, actually, I believe. He may correct me on that. It's around 9 or 10 years is how long we have known each other. We met each other on a bus, and we're going to get into that story in a minute. But he is an incredible individual, a proud brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He is a ice cold to the core. He is indeed an incredible lyricist when it comes to being on stage, the way that he makes people think, the way that he makes people dream. But most importantly, in my eyes, and the thing that I respect the most about him is the way that he parents. And the way that he parents his children with his incredible wife, Erica. And we're going to talk about that tonight, y'all. Please do me a favor. Start clapping out right now. Do a slow clap at home for the one and only Rick Daniels. Here we go. Rick, come through. What's good, man?
What's happening, my brother? That was an amazing introduction, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I don't read bios anymore, man. Coming straight from the heart. You're not that you sent me one.
Yeah, hey, but we done been in the game for so long together. We know each other's bio already, exactly. so it's all good, man. But thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to everybody who's streamed in.
Exactly. Rick, I'm so excited that we're together. The story is that we met on a bus, man.
We did.
And we met at a bus, and I love the way you talk about this, man. We met at a bus because we were both going somewhere. Tell the people more about that.
So James and I used to be assigned to an agency called Campus Speak, which I'm not sure, where they are in the marketplace now, but at the time they were the #1 agency for campus speakers. And it was like for speakers who were trying to get into the game at the time, it was like signing a deal. It was like, signing to the hottest label at the time. And we were supposed to fly down to Denver for a training. And I flew down to Denver. And when I got off the plane, I got onto the shuttle bus to the hotel. And I look across, everybody gets on the shuttle bus and I'm not really paying attention. And I look up and I see this guy on with purple socks. I think he had on purple socks.
Yeah, I got a brand.
Yeah, I know. So I don't exactly remember what happened, but I think you had on something Iota Phi Theta as well. Mm-hmm. And, I couldn't help it. I'm like, yo, Iota? And I think we just made the connection from that point. And I kind of looked at you and you looked at me and was like, what? You looking at me like that because I'm white? And we just hit it off from there. And the reason why I feel like the rest, as they say, is history. And the reason why I feel like that's so special is because I say that we met. The only reason we met is because we were headed somewhere. We were going somewhere. We didn't meet, in middle school and become friends on the playground. We didn't bump into each other in a coffee line and end up having a good conversation that lasted, whatever, how many years. Yeah. The only reason we got together that day is because you and I were headed, somewhere trying to take this thing to the next level. And so I'm grateful for you. I appreciate you. You're my brother. I love you very much. And, you have eaten some good meals at the crib. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that that my kids know you and my family knows you. And, I said a long time ago when our careers were in the same area, but sort of headed in a different direction, our friendship is stronger than an agency. It's stronger than a career choice. It's stronger than anything. The bond that we have are like sequoia roots. I'm saying? The sequoia tree has roots that connect. All the sequoia trees are connected to each other through their roots, yes, no matter where they are. And I feel like no matter where you and I go, our sequoia roots are always connected. So I'm grateful to be here, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak to the people, bro. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. What a beautiful analogy with the sequoias. Here's why I also love that is because sequoias are the biggest and baddest trees out there, man. And that's
that's right.
We try to be that as well.
Word up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Erica just chimed in and she said, them yams though. You was listening to the show. Yeah, it's
she hooked them yams up, that macaroni and cheese make you smack your mama.
It was so
there's only a few people know what that is. It make you smack your mama, but thank you for chiming in, baby.
Yeah, they were stupid good. Here's the thing, I came to the house and I'll be honest with you, man, I'd never had yams that I liked before. No offense to my Aunt Fern if she's listening. But I don't know what your partner put in there. But they were incredible, and I got thirds, I believe, not even seconds. I went for thirds. So yeah, but here's the thing that I love, brother, is coming to your house. Coming to your house, Rick, is family. It is immediately family. The way that your kids immediately embraced me, and whether that's because you read them my bio before I walked in, or whatever it was, but like your kids immediately were very warm, hugging me, showing me things like you got to come see the basement, and bringing me down, and the environment that you and your wife have created at the home is one that I hope to be able to emulate as a father one day. It is incredible. It's a union. That, I know your last name is Daniels, and I know you all refer to yourselves as a tribe called Daniels. Obviously, Tribe Called Quest reference. And And so I love it, man. I love it when you think, oh, there you go, we got the tattoo. Is that tribe?
It's a tribe.
I love it. So tell me, man. In general, we'll dive into what's going on today in just a second. Let's do a beach entry. In general, when it comes to parenting, what is a philosophy that you have in your home that you and Erica, have talked about? I mean, like, this is what we believe and how we believe we should raise our kids and whatnot. What kind of conversations do y'all have as a family, as a team unit?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you asking me that. I appreciate those observations as well. I didn't read my kids your bio. I just told them that I can't wait for you all to meet Uncle James. I have to say that I thank God for my wife. I really do, man. And I try not to talk about it too much because I get emotional, but she's my heir. I say often that she is Coretta. She's Betty. She is Michelle. She's all of them. She's every single one of them. And I am grateful for the woman that she is and the manner in which she mothers our kids and the wife that she is to me. I really, I think that I credit, we try to have a spiritual presence in our house, at all times. One of the things that I grew up a pastor's kid, and PK's in the house. If you're in the house, stand up. My parents we would always gather for prayer before school. Anytime that we left the house, particularly for school, we would gather for prayer. And it wouldn't, be very long, but it would just be a short prayer where we gathered together. Everybody took a day and everybody said a prayer. And that's something that I've taken with me. As a matter of fact, I believe you prayed with us, before we left out for school one particular day. And, for me, it's all about understanding, who God is in our lives and, how we are blessed. But also, we are unapologetically Black in my house, and we raise our kids to be proud of their Blackness. We raise our kids to understand the realities of this world. And we also raise them to understand the unique and complex contributions that we have made and continue to make to this world, and how we should have love for everyone and understand the difference and different struggles that everyone endures, but that it's okay to be proud of your Blackness. And I think that provides a certain level of love in our house that we live on. We live on love. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? We thrive on love. Yes. And both of us, my wife and I, we don't play with our kids. We don't play in this house. There is structure, but at the same time, we love our kids enough to talk with them and walk with them and understand that they are individuals and human beings, and not just our kids, our children, but they're individuals. And we also believe in legacy. Everything we do is to establish a legacy so that their generations, 3 and 4 generations down, will be able to see the fruits of our labor. So I think all of that, mixes to the point where, we raise them in such a way to where they love the Lord, they love themselves, and they understand the power of love in one central space.
Yeah. Incredible, man. And now I know you say you don't play with your kids, but I also know that you take your son to school on the basketball court every once in a while. So you
He
play with
taking
them.
me to school.
He is. Okay, I
He
don't want to
taking
bring.
me to school now.
I don't want to bring that up. I was there a while
Nah,
ago.
he's a bad boy. I'm gonna give him all the credit in the world. I think I still got a little muscle on him, so I can take it to the hole on him. But I told him, I'm not raising you to be a ball player. I'm raising you to be a man. I want you to learn about the game of life through the game of basketball. But I also want you to understand that I'm not raising you to go to the league or play for anybody's team. I tell them all the time, I'd rather you own a team than just be on a team. Okay? I'd rather you be the owner.
Own a team instead of
than
just being on a team. Yep.
Okay? See, because listen, when you're the owner, you can break your leg, you can tear your ACL and come to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
When you're a player, you can't do that. You tear your ACL and your whole career might be over. But when you own the team, you can limp your way to work and still own the team. Mm-hmm. And so I've always tried to help him to understand the power of his mind and how that extends on the basketball court, but also beyond the basketball court as well. But I'm still whipping him. But he's incrementally better at this point, which is great. I've always told him I wanted you to be a better man than me at every stage in life. So when you're 16, I want you to be a better 16-year-old than I was. I want you to think better than I did. I want you to get better grades than I did. When you're 34, like I am, I want you to be a better 34-year-old than I was at the time. Yeah. I want him to go further than I did in every aspect of life.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I know my dad said similar things to me about the game of golf. He never wanted me to beat him, but he was excited when I did, for sure.
Yeah.
And now and I used to beat him for a long time, and then I stopped playing as much. So now he beats me, but I don't want to talk about it. My dad's out here about to be shooting his age on the golf course, which is incredible.
Shout out to Pops.
Exactly. So the poet and the golfer and a great father. So I love what you were saying about the way we talk about legacy. We talk about you be proud of your blackness, but be proud of your blackness and show love to everyone, right? Like these things are not mutually exclusive ideas, and I think that is beautiful the way that you impart that into your children. I'm curious for you, fast forwarding to today. I would be curious to hear and a little bit of the past as well. When you were coming up, do you remember the lessons that your parents taught you about being black? And has the language shifted to how you now talk about your children about being black? I would be curious to hear that. Is there a shift? Is it similar? Speak on that for a little bit, man.
That's a great question. I remember an overwhelming sense of pride growing up. I credit that mostly to both my parents, but mostly to my father, Rick Daniels, who was always incredibly proud and, grew up. He was born in the 50s. So, of course, he grew up in a time where, the collective Black consciousness was expanding, such a great deal through all forms. And I can remember specifically, I asked this question in a speech once. I've never really said it in any other forum, but there's a movie out there called Brown Sugar, which is a love story that's centered around hip hop. And the movie opens up with a question, and the one of the leading characters, Sanaa Lathan, whose name is Sid Shaw, she's a journalist, and every time she interviews someone, she asks, "When did you fall in love with hip hop?" And so the question that I ask many Black folks out there is, when did you fall in love with your Blackness? When did you fall in love with who you are? Malcolm X had a speech called "Who Taught You to Hate Yourself?" And his entire premise was the hate that we have the hate that we have for ourselves is a learned behavior. So who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate your own kind? And I kind of try to flip that question and ask, when did you fall in love with your Blackness? When did you fall in love with yourself? When did you fall in love with what your Blackness means? And I can remember the moment that I fell in love with my Blackness, and that was during the Million Man March. My dad was always, we grew up in a very pro-Black household that embraced the beauty of Blackness. But on the Million Man March, my father wanted to go to the march, but he was a pastor, so he decided to stay in Milwaukee and have a day of prayer. It was a day of atonement. And I can remember coming down to the church to have prayer with the other members. Particularly, we had a lot of men at the church at the time, and when I was praying next to my dad, we were all on our knees in a circle praying, and he was holding my hand so tight. I'll never forget the grip he had on my hand at that time. And that was the moment I fell in love with my Blackness. That was the moment I knew that there was a purpose to this. That was the moment I knew, even at 10 years old, that there was more to this than just culture. And from that point, I began to really, understand the power of what it meant to be in love with myself. And I think that that upbringing really helped to shape who I am. It helped to shape my identity. Yeah. And then later on, it helped me to understand how powerful it is to love yourself and also love others. A lot of times people don't understand that we are capable, Black people are capable of loving ourselves and loving everybody else. To be pro-Black isn't to be anti-white or anti anything else. I'm capable of loving me and loving you. And that's why the response, the All Lives Matter response, shouldn't be a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter. It should be an extension to Black Lives Matter, but it should be sequential. Yes. Black Lives Matter. We have to realize, and Dr. King said this in many ways, we have to realize, in order for us to realize the true promises of America, we have to give the Black race what we've deprived it of for so many years. And so to everyone out there who strongly believes in the All Lives Matter principle, as you mentioned before, it's okay to believe that, but not as a counterpoint to Black Lives Matter, to an extension to Black Lives Matter, and understanding that it's okay for me to love my Blackness and love you. I am physically, emotionally, and spiritually capable of loving myself.
Turns out we're pretty complex beings.
Yeah, right. I can walk and chew gum.
Yeah, right.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm physically capable of loving myself and loving you at the same time. Yeah. But in order for me to love you, I don't have to compromise the humanity of my people.
Right.
I don't have to say it's okay for a person to get choked out on television in order for me to love you. Mm-hmm. I can say that it's okay for that. I can say that it's not okay for that to happen, and that we should seek justice for those and still love everyone else at the same time. And I think that's what my upbringing taught me.
Yeah. That is powerful. The story about your father, I've never heard that before. And the grip that he had, and that you'll never forget the intensity of that grip. Mm-hmm. That is so powerful. And I got a little welled up. I'm glad you moved on from that, because if you kept going deeper, it would have gotten ugly over here. And I'm just not ready to cry yet. I've been crying enough. But still, that's such a powerful moment of when did you fall in love with your Blackness? So your children are Erica put it in here somewhere. Your children are 14, 9, 7, and 5.
Yeah, it's a tribe.
So how old were you when that happened? How old did you say you were?
I was 10.
You were 10. Okay.
Yep.
And so in your children's journeys right now into falling in love with their Blackness, as you mentioned, you and Erica talk a lot about it, right? Where do you think your children are? And it's got to be interesting to watch them each influence each other while you also influence them, and how they start to fall in love with their Blackness, especially to the horrific counterpoints of media and things like that. Talk a little bit about that. I'd just be curious to hear, are you watching them each become more proud of their Blackness at different rates, at different times? Is that something that happens? Is 10 a typical time where that happens? Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that there are there's a moment where you fall in love with your Blackness, but then there are continuous moments over the years where you continue to fall deeper in love, and become more and more conscious in a way. For me, I think the second stage happened when I was in college. For my children, I I talk about my oldest son, well, my son, who's my oldest, and my oldest daughter, Madison. I think the other two are still developing, but I'm going to talk about those two specifically now. Christian is he's an incredible young man. He's incredibly intelligent. He's motivated. He's smart. You go through your own little 14-year-old stuff with him, but for the most part, he is a very strong-minded, strong-willed young man. Very competitive as well. And it wasn't until his past birthday that I realized how woke he really was and how much he's been absorbing, all of the different things that we've tried to walk him through, over the years. So each year, Christian and I do a goal setting exercise. And so you know how you have your general performance reviews on your job. Yeah. Me and Christian do sort of a performance review every year on his birthday. So sometime in the month of August, maybe not on his birthday. His
birthday is August 6th. Before he gets the cake, right? Like right before you give him the cake. Out to eat.
Right.
Right before you give him the cake, you're like, hang on, you got to get your review first. We're going to see how big of a slice of cake you're getting this year. Yeah. Keep going.
I always take him out. And we have a conversation and we go over his goals from the previous year and then talk about the goals that he'd like to see happen and the action steps he needs to take for the year before. And so with the year coming. And so I always ask him, what do you want out of year 14? This is year 14. This is the 14th year of your life. What do you want out of this year? What do you want to see happen? And this year, our conversation was a lot more expanded. It was much deeper because there's something about that year 14. Emmett Till was killed at 14. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's one thing to talk to your kid about goal setting when he's 8 and 9. But when he's 14, he's starting to see the world differently and the world is starting to respond to him differently. He's no longer the cute little baby boy. Yeah. Now he's a physical threat. He's taller. He's bigger. He got the hair. He's a bigger physical threat now. Yeah. So I've tried to have very conscious conversations with him. And I asked him this year, I had a number of questions, a number of subjects to talk about with him this year. And I asked him, what does it mean to be Black to you? And his answers, which I won't go into because I feel like they were really personal, but his answers just blew me away. And it helped me to understand that he has been listening. He has been taking things in, and he still has a lot to learn and a long way to go. But there was a certain pride there that I didn't know was as deep as it was. And it was really emotional for me because it was like, like I think he's starting to get it a little bit.
Wow.
And so I'm always interested in what he has to say because I think he has great opinions. This summer this time during quarantine, we started a father-son movie night series. I wanted him to watch all of the movies that had an impact on me growing up. So we started off with He Got Game, and then next is he loves to play ball. So yeah. We had an in-depth discussion about that afterwards, right?
Yep.
In a relationship with his father and all those different things that took place. Next is Boys in the Hood, Malcolm X, 13th, the documentary, Above the Rim. You know what I'm saying? The Wood. These are classic. Color Purple. These are classic Black films that shape my identity that I want him to at least see. Even if he doesn't even if they don't become his favorite movies, at least you can say you saw it. Because I do believe in the Black card. If you ain't seen Color Purple, I need to see that car. I need to see that car, bro. Like, you ain't seen Boys in the Hood. I need to see that car. And so there's a part of me that's like training him to understand the power of his Blackness within these films, but also because of the many lessons that exist. I'm very proud of him and I'm very proud of who he's becoming and the young man that he is, but also, him developing an understanding. My oldest daughter, Madison, is real woke. She's almost a little too woke to be 9. So you got to watch it, because she's a real raise the fist young woman. But I can remember one particular time I was watching the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay, and they were showing and Friday. Okay, I see you, Raven. We're gonna show. We're showing the first Friday, and I can remember I was watching 13th by myself, and there was a scene during the civil rights movement where white people, not the police, but just general white citizens were assaulting a black man who was protesting, and he wasn't fighting back. And my daughter Madison happened to walk in the room at this time, and she looked at the TV, and she just became disgusted. She was like, "Oh, come on. What did he do? What did he do? Why are they doing that to him? Wait a minute. Why isn't he fighting back? What's happening here?" And so I had to pause the movie because she was really fired up about this. And I had to pause the movie and try to have a conversation with her as best as I could with the 9-year-old about racism and the physicality of racism. And that's something that I feel like we shouldn't wait too long to teach our kids. We have found a way to teach our children about all of the horrific things that all of the heroic things that America has done in the name of freedom. We found a way to teach them about war. We found a way to teach them about colonialism. We found a way to teach them about all of the great things about America. We found a way to spoon feed that to them. We need to spoon feed them about the horrific things too. The kids can't just grow up thinking that America is this wonderful place of freedom and that everything that Americans have done is in the name of freedom. And it's all of this thing. I always say that educationally, America has done a good job of teaching us about the heroic details of our history, but not the horrific details of our history. Mm-hmm. So we'll teach you about the Civil War, but we won't tell you it was about slavery. It was about upholding the institution of slavery. We'll teach you it's about valor and about, preserving the ideas of America. But what we won't tell you about the Declaration of Independence is that people were enslaved. Over 4 million people were enslaved at the time that document was written. Right. And so I think that if we really want to raise our children in the next generation to be more active, to be more conscious, to be more empathetic, we can't just teach them that all people are great and all lives matter. We must teach them about the realities of the history of this nation. And we have to teach them that in the same way that we've taught them about all the other things. If we got to write children's books about slavery, we should write those. If we got to write children's books about colonialism, we need to write that because we need to figure out a way to teach them the history now before they learn about it after it's too late. Yeah. We are all too often exposed to our history after seeing a video like the one we saw last week, when we really should be learning that shit in school.
Accurate. Yes, I completely agree, and especially as I think about the way I was brought up and taught in my school. Now, I grew up in a town that was incredibly white, impeccably white, right? Like, I mean, I've said before, if you saw 5 black people walking together in my town, you thought it was a movement, and it wasn't it, right? Like that, and so. So it's also interesting because, the history books that I was taught with, I didn't realize only taught me a section of the curriculum, right? They didn't teach me the whole curriculum. And most of the curriculum had white saviors, right? Like, thank God for Abraham Lincoln. Thank God for, and a lot of white saviorism in it as well. And it's so interesting that is a continuous story that I was taught, yet I wasn't taught about other major things that were happening within arm's reach of my hometown, right? The Ku Klux Klan, one of its biggest hubs, was on Long Island, New York, where I grew up. I didn't learn about that till my 20s. You know what I mean? Like, right. And I mean, about the white.
So that's 20 years. Mm-hmm. That's 20 years.
Yep.
We have to put that into the context of time. That's 20 years.
20 years.
20 some odd. How old were you? 28, you said?
So you're mid-20s, yeah.
Mid-20s, let's just say 25. That's 25 years. It's a quarter of a century before you realize what was right in your backyard. Yep. That's how racism works. And it's crazy because also on top of that,
that's then 25 years of unlearning I have to do.
Yeah,
if I choose to put the work in, right? And on my good days I did, on my bad days I didn't, and that is what it is. I'll own my own stuff here, but it is so it's incredible because I was taught these major hallmark moments that happened in history, but I was taught about them like they were in the past. right? Like I went to school, I'm
Right.
born and raised in Long Island, New York. I went to school in the South. And I was taught that the South is racist. But I was never taught that the North is racist. And I went to the South and learned that the North is still racist also. You know what I mean? Like it's not like the
right.
North had figured it out. Like, thank God for the Civil War where we got to separate the racists and non-racists. Now, turns out that's not how that happened.
Absolutely.
And but I learned about the hidden ways that racism is happening. Like, you know, the canceling of bus routes, and you know, the white flight, and the way that people are, who's getting loans, who's not getting loans, and you know, like all that kind of stuff, right? Exactly. Yeah. The way property taxes work and how those funds then fund the schools that are in those counties, towns, and no wonder schools have different qualities, you know, and stuff like that. Like those are things that I wasn't taught in the moment. I was taught that in the racist South. And I'm not going to say the South is clean. I'm saying racism is everywhere. Let's make sure what everybody's hearing right now. But it's so fascinating when I think about what I learned, or really what I didn't learn. Like there's a whole curriculum out there that people haven't even gotten the Cliff Notes version of. They've gotten the beautiful tip of the iceberg. And that's about it. They have no idea what's going on below the surface, because what's below the surface is hard to see, and it's uncomfortable, and people don't like being uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, so it's interesting. And I guess so. Let's stay on this topic for a second in a slightly different way. I'm white. I don't know if you noticed that yet. I'm not sure. You know, I can't tell. This is good lighting, but come on. But still, I
noticed on the bus when I saw the Iota Phi Theta, I was like,
yeah, that's it. This man's in a historically black fraternity. Do you think he borrowed that shirt from somebody? But yeah, no.
But you know, Iotas, man, y'all got Iotas get respect for the way that they pushed through the civil rights movement. You know, the time in which y'all were founded. I know, you know, where the Iotas fall on the Divine Nine, but the time in which y'all was founded, y'all get respect for being founded around the principles of civil rights.
Yeah, right.
I rock
with
that.
Middle of it, September 19th, 1963.
I rock with that.
So I have a white family. A lot of the viewers right now probably identify as white. I would be curious. I had a conversation today actually with my nephews, and one of my nephews recently got on Instagram. He just turned 13. I think for his birthday present, they allowed him to get on Instagram. And so that's cheap. That was smart. But still, it's interesting because he kind of out of the blue on FaceTime today after we were talking about riding bikes and playing baseball in the backyard, and his birthday just happened. How was that? What did he get? You know, he's like, what's happening with the protests? And I was like, what? I was like, well, before I knew his parents were like, I can only see him and his brother on the screen. His brother's a little bit younger than him. I can only see them on the screen. And first off, I love that he asked. But I also thought to myself, I don't know what you're being taught at home right now. Now, I love my brothers. I know where my brothers fall. They are on the right side of history, but I don't know what conversations they've had right now. You know what I mean? Like, and so with that being said, I flipped it back on him. I said, well, you tell me, you know, do you know what happened? First off, my one nephew's a lot younger, said he's like, I think a firefighter was killed. And I was like, all right, Aiden, I'm going to cut you off, brother. But Aiden's much younger. And so I don't, again, like we talk about, like, you know, the awareness, like I appreciate you trying. But then I asked my older nephew, he said, he's like, cops killed a black man in Minneapolis. And I said, you're right. The police did kill. They murdered a black man in Minneapolis. And so it was a powerful moment. And I said, you know, how did you learn about that? Have you had conversation with your parents? And he said, well, I saw it from your Instagram, Uncle James. And then I was like, oh, shoot, I've been posting some language. Maybe I need to check what I'm posting. But more importantly, I loved that my nephew used that as a catalyst to ask his parents what's going on. And his parents showed up for that conversation in a really beautiful way, in a really powerful way, and didn't beat around the bush, didn't Disneyland the conversation. So I'm curious to hear. I'd be curious to hear for you. And I don't even know if this is the right way to ask this, but stick with me and feel free to reframe the question. But what advice do you have to individuals that are talking to their children or have started the conversation with their children or continuing the conversation with their children? What advice do you have, particularly for white parents right now or parent? In the conversations that they could be having, because you and I both know that this is when those seeds get planted, right? Like it was shown to me at 25 that I didn't see the whole picture, right? But like my nephew's having that conversation at 13. That's an incredible moment to start to be able to think about racism. What do I look like? What does that matter? Why was this wrong? That's 13 years of unlearning as opposed to 25 or 28. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that and I guess suggestions that you have, and maybe they even could be based with the way that you talk to your children about some of it as well. I know it is different, but I wonder if there are parallels.
I don't know. I don't know what advice I would have for white parents because I've only known how to speak to my kids as a Black man and as a Black parent. What I will say is this. You're doing yourself a disservice if you choose to hide this from them in any way. Talking to your kids about the realities of our racialized society, in my opinion, is just as important as teaching them about financial literacy. It's just as important as teaching them how to drive. It's just as important as teaching them how to bathe themselves and clothe themselves. If you didn't teach your child how to bathe themselves, they would stink, right? Like they would stink. If you didn't teach your children how to brush their teeth, they wouldn't brush them properly. I know because we allow our kids to brush their teeth on certain days. And it is reflective of how we teach them. And sometimes we got to go back and go behind them. And you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you can just tell. Some days they do a really good job. Some days we have to be parents and go back and brush your teeth. Some days it's like, I'm brushing your teeth all week. I don't care if you're 9. Like, I'm brushing your teeth this week. I think, this is not a direct correlation, but I think, you can use that as an analogy for how we talk to our kids about societal issues. If you don't talk to them about it, then mentally they will stink. Mentally, they will reflect the fact that they've never been taught how to really deal with societal issues. When you see children who do not know how to bathe themselves and who do not know how to, who do not understand how, as I mentioned before, financial literacy, oftentimes, it's because it's the way we've been taught. And I think that, or what we haven't been taught rather. And I think the same can be said for how we, work through issues with society. It's because we haven't been taught or the way in which we've been taught. You mentioned before, this is where the seeds get planted. I would also add to that and say that this is also where seeds can become uprooted because a lot of times children, we know that children aren't born with these ideologies, they're learned behaviors. And a lot of times kids really don't know the difference and they don't get the difference. And you may have children who sort of organically have an inclusive mindset, but then their parents uproot that and say, well, Black people really shouldn't be looting right now. And that's another seed that's planted. So as you mentioned before, that it's not just the seed that's planted, but it's oftentimes what's uprooted and then the seeds are replanted after that. Right. So I think it's important.
That idea that people are taught to hate, right? We're born.
Yes,
you're not
absolutely.
born hating. You're taught to hate.
Absolutely.
That's the uprooting
absolutely.
And the planting of hatred. Yes, I love that. Keep
going. And I would
say,
I think people are taught to see. I think people are taught to see the other. We otherize our kids, which then manifests itself into hate. I don't think a lot of kids are taught to hate. I don't think their parents literally plant the seeds of hate and say we need to hate these individuals. But what I think does happen is we decide to otherize the communities and say that those are the other folks over there who don't really deserve compassion. who don't really deserve for us to care about them. Turn the channel. That's how we otherize individual experiences, which then turns into hate because we fear and hate what we don't understand. Yeah. Now, conversely, of course, there are parents who do teach hate. So I'm not going to act like that doesn't happen. There are parents who do teach hate. There are parents who do teach white supremacy, who do teach superiority from a gender perspective. There are parents who foster toxic masculinity and things of that nature. But I don't think that's true for every case. I think in some case we plant seeds of what we've always been taught or believe, and that turns into hate. So what I would say to white parents, I think it starts with you, not your kids. A lot of times we're conditioned to believe that it starts with the kids. No, it starts with you. You know what you've been taught, and you know where that otherizing has come from. And so you mentioned in your top 3 different books that you can read. It's up to you to read those books, to gain the information, to gain the knowledge, to educate yourself, and then pass that and apply those tools onto your children. If you choose not to do that, then that's on you. That's on you. And I think that as parents, we can't shield our children from this. We have to have conversations with them. We have to engage with them, and think of the ways that you taught them about everything else. If you're a Christian, you teach your kids about Jesus before they know how to speak.
Yeah, right.
They know how to say Jesus, right? If you teach them about your religion before they know about religion, you teach them about your occupation before they know about your occupation, right? What does your father do? What's your dad or your mom do? Well, mommy's a teacher. She doesn't know all the deep, intricate details about what it means to be a teacher, but she knows that you teach. If you're a firefighter, your kids don't know all the deep, intricate dangers that you are faced with when you're fighting fires, but they know you're a firefighter because you taught them that. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to teach them about societal issues in the same way we teach them about everything else. We have to spoon feed them until they're ready to eat solid food. And when they're ready to eat solid food, we have to give them the proper food to eat so that they're not toxic, or they're not feeding mental toxins. Yeah. And I don't have the blueprint for that. I can't give you the step-by-step. But if you can teach your kids about everything else, you can teach them about racism. You can teach your kids about everything else. You can teach them about sexism. You can teach them about society. You can help them to understand the evils of this world in the same way you would help them to understand everything else.
Yeah. Man, so beautifully put. And I love that because I love the analogy also of like, you're going to spoon feed them and then you're going to get them to solid foods and then but then you got to start getting them to taste things that they probably don't like, right? It's like, I don't care if it's green, you going to eat this, right? Like,
you don't get up from the table unless you eat your food, right?
Right. Yeah. And
the same can be said about how we educate our children. You don't get up from this table until you understand what I'm trying to tell you right now.
Right. But one of the reasons why we are here today, one of the many, is because people are afraid that they don't have the right words. In social justice conversations, in diversity, equity, inclusion conversations, most people don't speak up because they are afraid to offend. And they are afraid to not be seen as completely woke. And it's interesting because, like, as I went through my through the training that I was afforded to me as a student leader and then as a professional in higher education, I learned, I got uncomfortable and I kept it moving. But I also know that there was a point where I decided that I was woke enough. And so when I was woke enough, now let me see your post online and let me come right for your throat real quick. Let me call you out. Let me be like, ba, ba, ba. Let me hit you with the 1, 2, oh, right? But there is power in finesse. There is power in the spoon feeding. There, like when we think about coaching, the great professional baseball coaches would not be great little league coaches, right? We have coaches that get us through different parts of our training and we can play a role. And so even if you are uncomfortable with the language that is being used, even if you're uncomfortable with, I don't know the perfect way to say this so that I don't offend anyone, opening your mouth is always better than not opening your mouth. Getting a kid to get up there and try to swing the bat, you learned to swim after you got in the pool, not before. But we got a lot of people waiting on the side of the pool to be told that they can swim and exactly how to swim, but you ain't gonna know shit until you actually get in the water and put your body in motion. It's the same thing with a lot of social justice training. And for me, when I got too woke or whatever, when I was feeling myself, I needed to check myself in that moment as well, because meeting people where they are is powerful. Congratulations that you figured out that Black Lives Matter. That's incredible. Thank you for being here. Now let's think about what was the process you took to get here. How can you help usher people along that process instead of beating them over the head? That's like climbing a mountain, getting to the top and telling everybody at the bottom they suck. Like you didn't just try to climb the whole damn mountain yourself. Sorry, I'm on a soapbox right now, but let me slip off real quick. But still, so it's interesting as we're trying to find the right language to use. Not being afraid as parents, not being afraid as friends, talking to other friends, as people talking to old neighbors that pop up on Facebook, or whatever, not being afraid of saying the exact, like something wrong, I think is important. Like you've got to start talking. And so I would be curious, like you do a lot of training at the institutions that you've worked at. And you've done a lot of trainings at the institutions that you have worked at. And, you know, we talk, you and I have had many a conversation about critical race theory, and whatnot. And I don't know if we're quite at the point of the conversation where we need to jump heavy into critical race theory, but if you got a Cliff Notes that you could ease people in with, we can talk a little bit about it. And I would be curious to hear some thoughts, but like, how do you recommend individuals, start having conversations that are uncomfortable, that are necessary?
Well, I would say this. I don't have a whole lot of syntax to offer. So I'm not sure if I can tell you exactly what you should say. But here's what I can help, what I believe I can help for individuals to understand. Racism is an extremely complex issue. It's an extremely complex phenomenon. And I do this with caution, but if we're talking about how to summarize it, I will summarize it in a binary. Okay? So I need people to understand that racism isn't just the individual, it's also the institutional. And so if you're looking for a way to understand it and how to at least internalize it to have somewhat of a conversation, understand that it's not just an individual problem. Black people and white people don't just have some sibling rivalry, like we lost the baseball game to white people, 100 years ago, and we want to get them back. Like, we don't just dislike each other because of the color of our skin. That's one of the things that really irritates me is when people say things like, simply because the color of his skin. It's not just simply because of the color of his skin. There's so much more that his skin represents that goes beyond just its color. So I would want people to understand that it's not a matter of people treating each other right, or treating each other equally, or treating each other the same, or being nice to each other, or not about sitting at the lunch counter with each other, or marching alongside each other. It is about dismantling institutions that have been set up historically to offer opportunities to some people and lock other people out of those opportunities, or slow the advancement of the opportunities of others, so much so that one group of people gets an advantage. And you talk about critical race theory, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But to summarize that point, I would want people to understand that it is not just the interpersonal forms of racism that exist. It is the institutional. The officer who murdered George Floyd didn't do it just because he didn't like him as an individual. He didn't do it because they didn't like each other. Like they saw each other one day and they got into it, and I'm gonna go get this guy because
they were trying to bring that whole like nightclub thing. Like they worked together in a nightclub in a while. I wonder if they hated each other. It's like
it wasn't a rivalry. You know what I'm saying? The reason why he died is because the institution of our police force has been positioned as a paramilitary force that designed to keep certain groups of people in line, even if I have to take your life in order to do it.
Yeah.
That's the institutional part of this conversation that we have to get over. And so I would caution individuals to think of it that way. Critical race theory is a theoretical framework by Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings. And there are a number of other scholars. So if I have any academic scholars out of there who know about critical race theory, please correct me. I know I may be missing a number of authors, but Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings is the first scholar that comes to mind. And critical race theory seeks to offer a theoretical framework to educate people on the ingrained nature of race and racism. And so it centers itself on three different pillars. The first is the ingrained nature of race and racism. This reality that race and racism are ingrained in the very fabric of our nation. Racism existed before this nation had a name, a flag, or a national anthem. Mm-hmm. It existed before we were even called America. Mm-hmm. So the fact that when the Declaration of Independence was written, and it was written that people like me were only 3/5 of a human being, that is ingrained into the Constitution of our nation. The fact that we had to have an amendment to that notion tells you how ingrained racism is. Yeah. We talk about a lot of the great things that exist in the Constitution of our United States, but we don't talk about all of the other things that are existed, like the fact that women didn't have the right to vote. That's ingrained into the fabric of our nation. So when we talk about the ingrained nature of race and racism, it is important to understand that it exists in many forms throughout the fabric of our nation, whether we want to admit to it or not. The second tenet of critical race theory is understanding the power of the narrative, and the master narrative and the counter narrative, and the grand narrative, and being able to understand how our stories are told by people who do not experience our life, people who do not experience what we go through. They have the power to tell our stories. And so critical race theory challenges scholars to change the narrative through the power of scholarship, to change the narrative by doing the work, by finding the data, by reporting the findings, by understanding the implications of practice. It challenges us to change the narrative and understand how the master narrative has been crafted for us, but we are responsible for the counter narrative. And finally, the third tenet of critical race theory is interest convergence. And what that means is the dominant people who represent the dominant culture often don't take an interest in your struggle until it converges with theirs. Okay. So Reebok recently put out a statement that said, and I'm paraphrasing, but ultimately their statement said, Reebok wouldn't be who it is without the Black community. And that's true. Because we all know how dope the questions were, right? The AI, the Allen Iversons. We all know how dope those were. We all know how dope the Shaqs were, right? We all know sneaker culture that Black folks bring to the table.
The pump, right? They came out with the pump, man.
Yeah, right. We all understand that. My question to Reebok is, why did it take for an individual to have a police officer's knee on his neck for 9 minutes for y'all to say that? Y'all didn't understand that when Mike Brown got gunned down? Y'all didn't understand that when Trayvon was gunned down? Y'all didn't think enough of it to say it when Ahmaud Arbery was shot jogging in his own damn neighborhood? That's interest convergence. The only reason why Reebok felt compelled to put out a statement at this point is because they understood that they could no longer afford to be silent. They can no longer afford to be silent. In the other incidents, they could afford to be silent and be okay. It'll be okay if we just fall back on this one. But it took a police officer to kneel on the man's neck for 9 minutes and look you right in the camera.
Right. With the hand
straight in the eye.
With the hand in the pocket, a casual killing. Like, yeah. Yes. Sorry.
It took that for you all to understand that the Black folks have been the fruit of y'all labor for over 50 years. to that I say that's interest convergence. Now, while I can appreciate the notion of care and the statement that was put out, what I called them to the carpet on is why it had to happen in this format, why it had to be such an extreme circumstance before we heard from the companies that we have given our money to, $1 trillion worth of buying power for centuries. That's interest convergence. So critical race theory is a theoretical framework that allows us to see the ingrained nature of race and racism. It allows us to understand how the narrative is shaped and shifted to support white supremacy and white power. And it is also helps us to understand how interests converge with one another. And I think it allows us to really see how we can call people to the carpet on the true essence of what it means to be inclusive and to develop equitable policies and procedures.
Yes. First off, thank you for the lesson. It's so powerful. The way you laid it out makes it digestible, comprehensible, and thank you for that. It's interesting because we watched companies 2 months ago. Right? 2 months ago, every single damn company I've ever bought a sock from, I've ever bought a razor from, I ever breathed the air in their store one time and they somehow were able to capture my email. I got an email from every company telling them how much they care about me and my health. I watch, man, thank God for Subaru and it's COVID-19 and we're all in this together. Bullshit commercials, right? Like we got an email from literally every company that's ever existed. How many emails have you gotten since George Floyd was murdered?
Come on.
How many emails have you gotten? Right? I got one. I got one. It was from Airbnb. Airbnb put out a really great email. They donated $500,000 and it was well said. And I give them props for that moment. Right. But like, even when we think about education, my undergrad hasn't said anything yet. Like my graduate school has, but my undergrad, like educational facilities, training companies that, right? You know what I mean? Like agencies that we were a part of. It took them a week to put out a post on Instagram. And you know what I mean? It's like you have, I'm not going to crap talk them, but still, you know what I'm saying? It's like, where y'all at right now? Where are y'all at right now? Right. And so it is very interesting to think about. And just raise an eye, right? Especially to that third interest conversions.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like, especially right now, where are these emails at, right?
Yeah.
It is so disappointing, disheartening, but also eye-opening to see. We are in an incredibly important time, and it is devastating. It is devastating that, like, if we look back through all of the people that have been murdered by the police, publicly or not publicly, we look back at all the black bodies that have been murdered by the police. Is it because this was the most blatant? Is it because this white dude kneeled on this man's neck with his hand in his pocket and looked right at the camera like, this is going down? Keep filming it, right? Like, is it because it's the most blatant, but it feels different. The country feels different right now than it has in the past. And I'm wondering if you're feeling that. I live in Minneapolis, right? I live in Minneapolis. And so I know I'm feeling it different than people who don't live in Minneapolis, right? I didn't live in Ferguson. I didn't live in Baltimore. I didn't live in Georgia. I didn't live, but I do live in Minneapolis. So I know it feels a little different for me, but it just feels different nationally. I'd be curious, are you feeling that, being outside Chicago, a city that has a historical slew of some issues, and especially with racism and redlining and things like that? Why is this different? Why has it taken this to get people to put black squares on their Instagrams, right? To finally do it. Like, what is it for you as you look at it?
I supported the Black Square movement, but Drew Brees put up a black square and then turned around today and said that he didn't think anybody should disrespect the flag during the national anthem. So I support the black squares, but if you're just doing that just to be a part of the social media, then that you're missing the point.
That's like Home Depot. Home Depot coming out with the Pride logo. Get the F out of here, Home Depot.
Or Absolute selling Pride bottles, but you don't hear about them when trans individuals are disproportionately killed. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't. There's a lot to be said there.
Yes.
What I will say to the question about difference, I got to be honest, James. I don't think it's that much different than what we've seen before.
I agree.
This isn't that much different. This isn't the first time that our people have been taken in front of our eyes. This isn't the first time that we've dealt with riots and individuals who just can't take it anymore and have no other way. This isn't the first time that we've seen those things. And I heard a comment on a corporate news station the other day. I always have to distinguish between corporate news and public news. If you're asking me for implications for practice later, I have a great format for how I think you should take in your news. But I was watching one of the corporate news stations, one of the cable news stations, and one of the commentators said, this wouldn't have happened and this didn't happen when Dr. King died. And I'm like, yes, it did.
100 plus cities, it did.
People rioted all over the place. They tore the whole damn place up. What do you mean this didn't happen with Dr. King? Where did you grow up? Who taught you that? Who's telling the story? To your original question about it being different, I don't know if I'm ready to say it feels different. What I will say is it feels like a tipping point. More so than I feel like I felt in the other cities.
Okay.
And the one thing that makes me feel that way is, and I see Sister Janine saying, Janine Patterson saying that riots are the cry of the unheard. That's so true. That's a poignant quote from Dr. King, and it's the truth. I want to talk about violent protests in just a moment, but it seems different because of the nature of the video. There was something about the police officer looking into the eyes of the camera that I think felt different for me. To me, it felt different to me. It's not different because it's happened before. Yeah. Mark Furman, you know what I'm saying? Don't forget about Mark Furman, who was also on Fox News the other day. Mark Furman, got up on the stand and they played a tape of the interview he had where he openly admitted to police brutality. He openly admitted to racialized police brutality. So it's not different. He was looking in the camera at that time during the OJ trial. So it wasn't, the cops being blatantly and casually taking Black and brown lives is not different. It's not new. But what's different about it today is that it was filmed by a 17-year-old Black young woman. That's different. That's new. It was filmed by a few other people from different angles. That's new. That's different. It was caught on tape with citizens who can immediately upload it and get it to the people. They didn't have to sell it to the news station. That's new. That's different. I think those are the things that I believe are causing the revolution that we see. To the notion of newness, I would just caution people to understand that none of this is new. It is a repeat. It is a pattern of behavior that has existed in our nation for many, many centuries. And what we saw is not just at the hands of police. General white citizens have been guilty of racial violence. The people who caught Ahmaud Arbery and shot him were not police officers.
Right.
They were general everyday citizens making what they called a citizen's arrest, which tells me that white people in that position felt like they had as much power as the police.
Yes. Yeah.
They had as much power as the police to take your life. So I would just caution people to be careful with this idea of newness. Just because it's new to you, don't mean it's new to us.
Yeah.
It's old, actually. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why people are reacting in the way that they are, is because it's old. It's an old problem. It's an age-old problem that's been happening for centuries. What's new is the fact that we are able to tell the stories ourselves. And we don't have to wait on somebody else to tell that story for us. We don't have to wait for a movie studio to tell the story in the way they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to wait for a news story to tell the story in the way they see fit. Right. We can pull the camera out and tell the story ourselves. And that, I think, is the newness of this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful. And I agree. And, you and I had a conversation recently where we talked about a pet peeve of yours. And a pet peeve of yours is when a lot of people are now coming out being like, we need to start the conversation. We need to start the conversation. It's like, no, you need to join the conversation. You need to, right? Like, the conversation has been going, right? Like,
absolutely.
And that was powerful, right? And you had a twist on that I really liked. For instead of people saying we need to start the conversation, what was your twist on that? I really loved it.
I'm glad you said that. Yes, one of the things that irritates me when this happens is are individuals who say that we need to start the conversation, or I'm hoping that we can use this as a way to start the conversation. And I believe that it is a highly problematic statement because it assumes that people like myself haven't been having this conversation for our whole lives. I've been having this conversation my whole life. Yeah. I had this conversation when I was 12 years old, and me and my mother were pulled over at an ATM machine by police officers who stopped us at the ATM machine and ran up on us. Yep. Guns weren't drawn, but they had the guns in their hand and said that we fit the description of two individuals who robbed an elderly lady somewhere in the area earlier that night. A mother and her 12-year-old son fit the description of burglars. I started the conversation at that time. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So don't assume that people are just now starting the conversation. Listen, just because you just now starting it, don't mean I am. Yeah, right. Just because you just now starting to talk about it, don't mean everybody else is. The world doesn't revolve around you. You said you had a good response to this last night, and you said, but what about for individuals who really are starting the conversation right now? And I appreciate that because there are some who are just now starting the conversation. You mentioned you were somewhere in your 20s before you were truly exposed to brought to a certain level of understanding. Mm-hmm. There may be individuals who are, 20, 30, 40, or 50 or 60 years old who are just now bringing this to their understanding. To those individuals, my response is this. Don't say that it's time for us to start the conversation. Use I statements and say that it's time for me to start the conversation. It's time for me to start the conversation with myself. It's time for me to start the conversation with my family. It's time for me to start the conversation with people on my job. It's time for me to start the conversation and educate myself more about how I can become a better person and how I can understand my racial bias and my privilege. Don't tell us it's time for us to start the conversation. I see that in the same way. You ever been around a person, you ain't seen a person in a really long time, and y'all shake up, y'all dap up, and you say, "Hey, bro, we got a link. We gotta get together. Let's get together sometime." You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what's up. That's how I feel. Start the conversation. That's in the same vein. You and I both know that when you see that person, and you say we got to get together. You and I both know that you don't necessarily mean that literally.
Nope. Yeah.
Because it's vague. Yeah. All I'm telling you is if you and I happen to get together sometime, that'll be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be lovely.
But we didn't make any plans. we didn't give a date, time, location, where we're gonna eat, what we're gonna do. We didn't go through any of those specifics.
Yes.
All I said was we're gonna get together sometime. That's what starting the conversation means to me. What you're really saying to me is we'll talk about this later.
Yep.
And I would really appreciate if we could start this conversation another time.
When it's more comfortable.
When it's more comfortable, more convenient.
Yes.
And hopefully not at all. But I really wish we could just have this conversation later. To the individuals who are just now starting the conversation, I'm cool with that. But I would encourage you to look at it as an individual and say it's time for me to start the conversation, not us.
Rick, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for coming through to this show. It is very important for people to realize, and I want to want to speak on this just for a second. It's very important that people realize that it is not the oppressed job to teach you about why their oppression should matter. And so it was really, I was very cautious in asking you, Rick, because this is a tough time where everybody's got a lot of feels. But fortunately, there are educators like yourself that are willing to be in both spaces at the same time, occasionally. The space where you are holding space for the needless murder of a black man at the hands of a force that is supposed to be protecting, right? Protect and serve.
Right.
And in George Floyd, you are able to hold that space while you are also able to hold the space for educating individuals that maybe aren't going through it the way you're going through it. And the way that you and the way that you spoke this evening is a gift. I cannot thank you for what you taught me, right? Like, I mean, you, even in the way that you checked me on some of my language in this conversation was I'm very grateful for, and because I'm a work in progress, but work and progress being the key words.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
you know what? Let me say something. If I could offer just a couple of key takeaways, I just want to offer a couple key takeaways that I think that will be helpful. You mentioned being a work in progress, and I'm a spiritual man, as I mentioned to you before. And one of my favorite scriptures says, "Faith without works is dead." Faith without works is dead. And I believe that in order for us to move forward, it's going to take faith and works. And a lot of people have the faith, but they don't have a work ethic. They got all the faith in the world, but they're not willing to work for it. And then you have some folks who have all the work ethic, but they have none of the faith. And so to that, I say, spiritually, those two must converge. We must understand what it means to have faith and how that couples and is connected to the work that we must do in order to move forward. But for those who are just doing the work, it is not enough to just do the work. You must have the faith as well. Those two must work in tandem. I would also say to individuals, if you're asking about what Black people want, it is not for a chance to sit at the same lunch counter with you. It is not for the chance to ride on the same bus with you. It is not for the chance to shake hands with you and live in peace and harmony. A Black agenda exists a Black agenda means offering equitable opportunities in the areas that we have been historically left out. Over the 401 years that we have been on this soil, in this nation, we have been deprived of a quality of education. We have been deprived of economic opportunities, entrepreneurship opportunities, real estate and home ownership with redlining. I saw somebody mention that before. We need to dismantle the prison industrial complex. We don't need to reform it. We need to dismantle it. As Myandra Cody says, we need to end the school to prison pipeline. We need to offer, you want to talk about reparations, pass House Bill 40. I want my 40 acres and I want my mule. You want to talk about past reparations? The 6-year-old little girl, George Floyd's little daughter, is trending this today. About she was on sitting on her uncle's shoulder, smiling, saying, "My daddy changed the world." You want to change the world? Guarantee her a college education and give her a low interest, no money down, no interest home loan to start when she's 18 years old, so she can have access to property and economic wealth. You want to change the world? Give her those opportunities. Don't just give her a symbolic gesture. Don't name a street after her father. Don't just give a resolution. Give her an opportunity to succeed that you would take away from her if this wouldn't otherwise circumstance. You want to talk about equity? We have to give equity, not equality, but equitable opportunities in the areas that we have been historically locked out. In voter suppression, that's a Black agenda. That's an equity agenda.
Yes.
Once we realize these things, then America will live up to its true promise. The true promise, not just the promise for white men and women. One other thing I want to say real quick.
Please, man. Please.
Stop misquoting Dr. King. Stop it.
Uh-oh. Are they ready? Are they ready for this?
I need you to stop misquoting Dr. King. When Dr. King died, he was one of the most hated men in America. And he died broke. Many people don't know this, but Harry Belafonte had to pay for his funeral. He didn't have the money to pay for his funeral, and he left behind 4 kids. How many kids I got?
4 kids.
4. Dr. King left behind 4 kids. Malcolm X left behind 4 kids. Both of these men died before the age of 40, and they died broke. Stop misquoting Dr. King. He didn't die in his sleep. He didn't die of natural causes. He was murdered. So when we speak about Dr. King, we don't need to speak about the death of Dr. King. We need to speak about the murder, the vicious murder. He was shot in the face, bro. He was shot in the face in a suit on the way to work. Don't tell me I need to pull up my pants when Dr. King was shot in a suit. One of the most famous quotes Dr. King has that people like to misquote comes from an essay he wrote, and I'm going to close on this, called The Rising Tide of Racial Consciousness. And in that essay, Dr. King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice
everywhere.
Everywhere, right? But a lot of people don't know that there's an A portion and a B portion to that quote. We only quote the A portion.
Yep.
But the full quote says, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Therefore, no American can afford to be apathetic about the problem of racial justice. That's the full quote.
Right. People don't want to hear that part, though. People can't.
Therefore,
they're not ready for
that.
They're not ready for it.
They're not ready for it. Therefore, no American can afford to be apathetic about the problem of racial justice. You want to quote King, quote him appropriately. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Therefore, none of us can afford to be apathetic about race at this time. None of us can afford to be apathetic about race and racial justice at this time. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and to be a part of your enormous platform. Like I said, we go back, we got roots, and I truly appreciate that. And keep doing the work because it takes all of us to do it. And while I am exhausted by being the person, by feeling like I have to educate white people on my blackness and on Black history, yes, I still take that mantle on for the ancestors who couldn't do it, for the ancestors who didn't have the opportunity to do it. And furthermore, I don't trust white people to tell my story.
No,
I don't trust you to teach me about me, to teach my kids about me. I'm gonna tell the story, and we have to tell our story in the most accurate way. And so I appreciate the platform to do that, and I appreciate you allowing this moment to resonate with your platform as well. So thanks for having me on, bro. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. I can't say enough. What a perfect Dr. King full quote to end on. And thank you. Even in the midst of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, taking this opportunity to teach me, and in a moment where people are listening a little bit more, your words resonate louder.
Word up.
And so thank you for still screaming into this, because this can't just be some echo chamber. So
absolutely. I also want to say one more thing. I call for the open condemnation of racial violence and anti-Black racism. I call for the conviction, not just the charging, but the conviction of all 4 officers who were involved. I call for them to be sentenced to the maximum sentence and put them in a maximum security prison, not some nice little prison somewhere off elsewhere. Drop them in the same Rikers Island you put them niggas in. Drop them in the same Rikers Island you put all Pookie and Ray Ray and all of them and their family. Drop them in the same space you put them in. I call for the destruction and and I call for the deconstruction of systems of inequity and the constructions of new systems. That is my call. That is my charge. I don't want to see another Facebook status of how much you hate racism and how we all need to come together. If you really want to help, call for the charge and the conviction, because police officers have been charged before.
Sure, plenty of times.
They have been charged before, but call for the conviction and the accountability of officers with police violence. If they know they're going to end up in the same prisons they put us in, they'll think twice before they shoot. And I think that needs to happen. It is the accountability. It is the federal legislation that we need. not just hugs and kisses. We need federal legislation. We need state legislation. We need action, political action.
Mm-hmm.
I call for voter confidence. Vote on all down ballot elections. Don't just vote for the president. Vote for all down ballot elections, all the way down to your school board and your alderman. Vote for them all. I call for the end of voter suppression and the end of voter depression. Don't be depressed about the vote. Go out and do what you need to do, but also understand that it's not just the president. This didn't start with Donald Trump, and it doesn't end with Donald Trump.
Nope, he's still going to stay tweeting too.
Right, but it does start and end with you. So each individual has to own their privilege and own what they can do and their responsibility in this notion. We often hear, one of the things we hear a lot in community college systems is that enrollment is everybody's issue. Enrollment, everybody's responsible for enrollment. One of the things I'm known for saying in my college is that everyone is responsible for equity. Equity is everyone's issue. Mm-hmm. And so while you might not have been a slave master, doesn't mean you don't have a slave master's mentality. While you might not have participated in acts of racism as you know it, doesn't mean that you don't have racist ideology, racist mindset. We all need to work on what we need to do better to contribute to the world. But I call openly for the conviction of all 4 officers and the passing of federal legislation that allows us to hold police and racial violence accountable, finally, once and for all.
Yes. Yes. Let's get those records public. Right? Like, let's get those. Let's records got to be public, right? Like, I mean, two of the 4 officers, right, had how many prior complaints and whatnot, right, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ryan O'Rourke, fairfight.com, Stacey Abrams, support that. Mm-hmm. And I ain't got nothing to sell you. I ain't got no books out right now. I ain't got nothing like that. All I have right now is my heart, and my heart bleeds right now in the streets. And I can't go out and protest like I want to. My protest has to start here in the basement. Has to start at the dinner table. It has to start out in the yard. Me and the kids is working. It has to start here. And I encourage everybody here to do what Bell Hooks said and organize anywhere. You don't got to go out to the protest in order to organize. You can organize on your job. You can organize with your social media. You have power. You have agency.
You have a platform.
And I want people to understand that. Yeah. So thank you, bro. I appreciate it, man. I'm fired up. I don't say I'm on the soapbox. I'm on the sneaker box. I'm on the sneaker box now.
I've seen your sneaker game, and that is true. A bright orange box too, if I know my man correctly.
But thank you, bro. I appreciate it, man, and I appreciate everybody who signed on. And thanks for having me on tonight. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I want to open it up. If you have a little bit, I'd love to open it up for question and answer. And I'd love for people to put some questions in and talk about it. And so if you're listening to this podcast right now, make sure that you go to my YouTube page. Just look up James Robilotta on YouTube, and you'll be able to see this question and answer portion for sure. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. So y'all have a great night. So I would be curious. It's going to take a minute just because of the live stream delay. But also, if you're here and you just shout out, like, we got a lot of people who love this. Raven, thank you so much. You've been super wonderfully vocal throughout this entire thing. D-Lab, I agree. Show us that body cam video now.
That's right. That's right.
Let's go. I love this, Raven. Right. My body is tired, but I don't care. I'll do anything for justice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, some really powerful. Thank you, Kathy, for this. Kathy, real talk.
Former colleague, worked together, UW Whitewater. Kathy Craney, what up?
Shout out to Whitewater.
Come get in the shop, baby.
Is that Erica?
Yeah, Erica stepped in. She don't want to get in the shop, but it's all good.
All right, that's fine. So I'd be curious if people have some questions. So feel free to put those in there, and it could be questions for both of us. If there's something that I said that you have a question or comment about, make sure that you put that in there as well, because I'm happy to. I guess I'm happy to also learn and have myself checked and whatnot. So please put that in there. Rick.
So I have a question that came in from Courtney Patterson. Shout out to Courtney. My homegirl, your professor. Oh, no, Courtney Patterson from Whitewater. I'm sorry, Courtney Patterson from Whitewater. Here. Love you, Courtney. Gospel choir fan, what up? Is it better to be a part of an effort now, even if it feels disingenuous, or not to say anything? I'm asking honestly and not defensively. I want our companies to do and be better but I don't know how to do it correctly now. So is it better to be a part of an effort now, even if it feels disingenuous or not say anything? I think it's better to be a part of the effort now. But I think you have to understand people who have privilege oftentimes have this innate feeling about this innate need to feel good about themselves.
Yes.
And this innate need to be validated for being a part of something. And this innate need to affirm who they truly are. And so a lot of times, some of the message that I've gotten from people, particularly white folks, have felt disingenuous. And I've tried to address that accordingly. But I think that whatever you feel for being involved will pale in comparison to what people like me have to go through every day. So if you got to go through a couple Facebook comments about your post, deal with it.
Yes.
If you have to catch a couple side eyes from people like me, deal with it. Because these are the things that we have had to live with much worse, much more intense ways of thinking and being and knowing and sense making and understanding for the entirety of our existence. So to that I say, I think now is the time to join. But understand that when you join, you might be met with some resistance because you should have joined a long time ago. You should have been a part of it a long time ago. But it shouldn't stop you from being a part of it. Just because we don't openly accept you and give you a hug when you come in doesn't mean you don't have to fight for social justice. You need to keep fighting because the reality is we were never accepted with hugs and kisses when we walked in the door.
Facts.
But we kept fighting too.
Yeah.
So forget about what makes you feel good and join. As long as it's genuine, then you can join. I see a question by Sister Raven Johnson. What do you believe the role of Black women play in dismantling systemic oppression? I love that question because one of the things that has irritated me about the grand narrative that we've seen mostly in headline news media is the absence of the Black woman. The Black woman has not. Black women deal with racial violence and domestic violence and police violence on an alarming level that many people don't know. And we need to say their names too. We need to say the names of Tashana Bryant. We need to say the names of Sandra Bland. We need to say the names of so many people, of so many Black women who have been victims of this as well. And furthermore, at the intersection of race and gender, Black women have it the worst.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yes.
I don't care how uncomfortable that makes any Karen feel. Y'all don't have it as bad as Black women.
Shout out to Karen.
Y'all don't have it as bad as Black women. Shout out to Keisha. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna shout out Keisha, Taniqua, Tanasha, all of them. I'm gonna shout them all of them. Erica, Ebony, Miss Susan, Sheena, Christian, Madison, Morgan, Chloe. You got to shout out the names of Black women who have been through this, who are going through this, and who will go through this.
Yes.
Black women are the fabric of our nation. They are the fabric of our nation. They took care of the master's kids when the master and his wife was too busy to do it. My grandmother made beds for white people in order to put my father through college and my cousins through college. Black women have held it down and have been held down on a level that no other species on this earth has been held down. So the role of Black women in this revolution is the role of Black women in every revolution. And that's to keep being Black women. That's keep holding it down. That's keep keeping us in check. That's keep being who you are and doing everything that you've done and doing everything that you continue to do in dismantling system. Black women have done more work to dismantle systemic racism than anyone. It is only the Black men that we have put on the forefront. Mm-hmm. It is only the Black men that we have upheld. Barack Obama wouldn't have had the credit he had without being married to a Black woman. Let's be real. You think we would have accepted Obama collectively as a Black community if he was married to a white woman, a tall blonde with long hair and mixed kids? No. His Blackness was solidified by being married to that Black queen, that sister, that helped him to come to a level of understanding.
Yes.
That allowed him to be able to stand up for the people the way that he did. Michelle Obama was the spirit behind that operation. And we salute her. And we salute all the Michelle Obamas in the world. Those before Michelle, those now, and those after Michelle. So I think the role of the Black woman is to keep being as great as you are. The role of the Black man and everyone else is to elevate the Black woman's voice so that we understand the pain in that narrative as well. That's what I would say to that. Black women, y'all ain't got to change nothing. Keep being as great as you are. It is incumbent upon us now to raise your voices and to raise and to change that narrative so that we understand how powerful the voice of the Black woman truly is. Yeah. Malcolm X said it best. We need to do whatever we can to protect our Black woman, even if it means our life. That's what we need to do.
Couldn't have said it any better myself, for sure. Beautiful. The courage of Black women is infinite. Yes. It is courageous, and that's disappointing to say, but it is courageous to be a Black woman today, yes, and to be unapologetically Black. I commend, appreciate, respect, tip my cap, and open my ears when I can to Black women. Thank you for the way you spoke on that. We had another great question come in from Alka. I said, if I'm starting to teach myself about racial justice by reading, etc., how do I keep learning without getting too overwhelmed about how much learning I will want to do?
I appreciate that question, Alka, and thank you for asking that. I try to offer as be as honest as possible and say that I don't know if you'll ever, you're always going to be overwhelmed.
Yes. You're
always going to be overwhelmed. The realities of racism in our country is overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. What I would say is I often suggest that people understand all of the things that have happened in between the milestones that we've learned. You know, a lot of times Black history is taught in milestones. Right. And so we learn that you got slavery, and then you got the civil rights movement, and then you got Obama, and then you got crack, and then Obama, and then that's Black history all in one. And we are taught Black history in a series of moments that take place, not understanding all of the things that have taken place in between those moments. You take a look at the road from Plessy to Brown, right? From Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus Board of Education, and everything that happened in between those notes, in between those two moments, in between Plessy and Brown, there was so much that took place. It's very, we need to educate ourselves on everything that took place then. So the reality is that you'll be overwhelmed by it. Don't allow that overwhelmed sensation to stop you from wanting to learn. Mm-hmm. Step back, take a deep breath, go jog, go have a glass of wine, go sit, sleep on it, but get up and commit to reading for another 10 or 15 minutes the very next day. And saying that, and with the understanding that no matter how overwhelmed I get, this is important for me, information for me to know. I get overwhelmed by math, but I had to pass it in order to get my degree, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm overwhelmed by my dissertation, and I ain't even really started it yet.
Yeah.
But I have to do that in order to graduate, right? I'm not going to graduate. There's a term called ABD, meaning all but dissertation. If I don't do my dissertation, I'm not going to get my degree. I'm going to be ABD, meaning I've completed all my coursework, but I didn't complete the final work in order to walk across the stage.
And no one puts ABD on their signature.
No one, right? Because it doesn't mean nothing.
Right. No one puts, you put 26.2 as a sticker on your car. You don't put 25.8. Right? Like.
Right. Absolutely. So as much as no matter how overwhelmed I get, I am determined to complete my degree.
Yeah.
And I think that the same needs to be said for how we educate ourselves on social justice. No matter how overwhelmed you get, you need to be determined to educate yourself so that you can educate others around you. So I would embrace the overwhelming sensation, because a lot of it is. When you understand lynching in this country and how after the uprising of the Ku Klux Klan in between 1929 and 1946, lynchings rose over 100%. Over 100%. There's a Black Almanac. You can see the graph. Lynchings, there was a spike in lynching during the Great Depression. Isn't that interesting that there's a correlation between the Great Depression and the killing of black men and women? As soon as white folks got depressed, they said, oh no, y'all got to go too. Mm-hmm. Y'all got to go too. Isn't it interesting that during that time period, we were killed more? That's overwhelming. And it should be. When I went to, when I took my family to the Smithsonian Museum for African American history and culture, and we went to the Emmett Till exhibit, I became overwhelmed and I began to weep. And I try not to talk too much about it now because I weep right here in front of everybody. But the exhibit was incredible because it was like you were going through a funeral processional, and like you were taking a look at the casket, and then leaving out like you were actually at the funeral. And I grabbed my 13-year-old son and I held him as tight as I could, and I held him and I cried because Emmett Till was 14 when he was killed, when he was lynched, when he was brutalized and murdered. And my son is only 13 years, he's 14 now. So that means in the context of time, if I send him down south for the summer right now, he might not come back. Mm-hmm. I cried as hard as I possibly could that day, and I wanted my kids to see me cry because there's something healthy about being overwhelmed sometimes. There's something healthy about being succumbed by emotion. And if you are not overwhelmed by what has taken place about racial injustice in this country, then there's something wrong with you. If you can read about that and be able to emotionally withstand what's happened to us, then there's something wrong with you. You should be emotionally overwhelmed.
Yes.
So don't be discouraged about getting overwhelmed. Embrace that feeling. Take as much time. Don't take as much time. Take the break that you need, but then come back and continue to educate yourself and fight through that overwhelming sensation, because it will happen. The more that you learn about racial injustice, the more you will become overwhelmed. Embrace that feeling and continue to educate yourself. That would be the advice that I have.
Yeah, for sure. Great takeaways. Alka, I love what you put here. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's not like, why are you so angry? It's why am I not?
Why are you not? Yeah, absolutely.
You said something really powerful earlier in there, Rick, that I want to touch base on, is that, you mentioned about put down if you get overwhelmed, that's okay. If you need to put down the book, that is okay, as long as you're going to pick it up again tomorrow.
Pick it up.
Right? You got to
because I was going to say take as much time as you need, but don't take as much time as you need.
Right, because here's the other powerful thing, right? We know that the difference between diversity education and social justice is that, the diversity education is learning something, absorbing something. Social justice is learning something, absorbing something, and then doing something, right? It's the action. And so sometimes that action, during those moments where you put the book down, it's about reflection, right? A little bit, we're not going to get too deep into Blackout Tuesday and whether it was right or wrong or was squares or whatever. But the point of Blackout Tuesday was to reflect, was to learn so that you can reflect and then do something today. Not so that you can learn, reflect, and then be like, cool, here's my selfie the next day. It's now, cool, what are you doing tomorrow, right? And so that reflection piece is often just as important, if not sometimes more important, than when the book is to your face or the movie is in front of you. The conversation afterwards is often just as important. So I love the
and that is again very, very, very great point. That is again where I would go back and return to the comment that I made before about having the conversation with yourself.
Yes,
it's time for me to start the conversation.
Yes.
And that is where that moment of reflection is where you start that conversation.
Yep.
And that's where whether it's verbally or otherwise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, we got another cool question from Sidra. How do we explain to our kids all of our experiences are different without otherizing?
How do we explain to our kids all of our experiences are different without otherizing? I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I think that we have to explain our experiences without superiority. Like, we have to explain what we've been through, what our people have been through, how hard we have worked, without making it appear as if we deserve more justice than anyone else. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So take, for instance, right? Let's say that you I hear a lot of people say that, I worked really hard to get where I am. And my parents and my grandparents worked really hard to get where I am. And my grandfather was a farmer, and he worked really, really hard to keep that farm. And I don't think that there's racism, because my grandfather, worked as hard as he possibly could, and so did my dad, and so did me. And we didn't have it easy, but we worked really hard. All right. To some extent, that may be true. And I'm sure it is. I'm sure your grandfather really did work hard. But it's possible that the farmland that your grandfather owned was given to him unlawfully, passed down through generations. So while your grandfather may have worked hard, 2 or 3 generations prior to him, that person may have been given land that was unlawful. So don't make it seem as if other people don't work as hard as your grandfather did. Understand that there are many people who work as hard, if not harder, than you or anyone else, and have experiences just like you or anyone else. But understanding the role of society, understanding the role of institutional racism, understanding the role of privilege, those are the things that help us to understand how we have been given certain advantages, even if we didn't ask for them. And I think that helps to minimize the otherizing. I think that in some ways we're all sort of conditioned to otherize. And so I think that in some ways we need to recognize that. But I think that we have to minimize the otherizing, and understand that there are other people who work just as hard as you do, who had experiences just like you do. Another way I would say that is stop comparing your experiences to others so much.
Yes.
You don't have to compare in order to relate. Just say, I relate to that because, but you don't have to compare. You don't have to say that I worked hard too.
No one wins in the struggle Olympics, right?
Yeah, no, right. Or oppressionopoly, as Angela Davis would say. Yeah. You don't have to always make comparisons, and you don't always have to make comparisons in order to get your point across. And I think comparisons also otherize. Making direct correlations and comparisons to people also otherizes, and we don't always have to do that. So it's okay to understand your experience and to teach about your history, your culture, and who you are, while also blocking out the supremacy and say, you know what? I am proud to be Irish, and I really rock with Irish people, and my Irish heritage was dope. But it doesn't mean that I get to say that Irish people deserve more justice than someone else who was black or brown. Mm-hmm. My parents came over here on a ship, and they had opportunities, and that's what's up. But it doesn't mean that I get to demonize people who are coming over here, jumping the fence, getting away from violence over there. Doesn't mean I get to demonize someone else. They coming over here for the same opportunities your grandfather came over here on.
Yep.
They want a better life. Yeah. They're fleeing their country just like my father fled Ireland to come over and have a better opportunity. So there's a way for you to still, like I said before, love yourself and still love everybody else. It's okay to still be proud of who you are without otherizing someone else and making it appear as if that's where the sort of like tenets of superiority start to seep in.
Yeah.
So that I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I mean, a lot of black people would tell me that their great grandparents, came over on a ship too.
Yeah,
it's a pretty different ship though.
Yeah, and they didn't have a choice to get on that ship.
Exactly, and also like to your example earlier about like, did your great grandfather, did he get that land unlawfully from somebody who was passed down to him? If you whatever, yeah, exactly. Or maybe he did work hard, and maybe he walked into that bank and asked for that loan and got that loan, but the black man with the same credentials right behind him didn't get the loan.
Yeah,
right.
Even Japanese folks, right? You take World War II. During World War II, we understand that there were Japanese internment camps. Mm-hmm. And after those internment camps were shut down and the people were released, the people who survived that were released, those folks didn't get their land back. And so you had a large number of Japanese men and women who owned farmland and were farmers who were seized from their land, from their homes, put in internment camps on American soil during the war. And then after the war, they were released. But it was the biggest transference of land in American history. It was the biggest transference of land in American history. Who you think got that land? Right. So while your grandfather or great-great-grandfather might have worked really hard, chances are he got that land from somebody that was interned.
Right.
So we need to recognize those things. And I think that that's really tough for people to do. But that's the work that we need to do.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Rick, I can't thank you enough. I love this point by Courtney. Is that to the point earlier from Alka, it is a privilege that we get to read about it in a book, right? And not live it every day. So yeah, Courtney, you and I as white people, that is white privilege. Exactly. So
yeah. And look, man, we all have privileges and targets. That's what I say.
Sure.
I think that everyone has a privilege and everyone has a set of targets. For me, my target is being an African-American male, a black male, in a country with an unimaginable history of anti-black racism. When you really peel back the layers of racism, it is unimaginable. It is inhumane. But my privileges are I am also a able-bodied, cisgender Christian male in a society that holds all of those traits more favorably. So I also have to recognize my privilege as a man in order for me to raise my daughters better, in order for me to rid my son of toxic masculinity. I also have to recognize my privilege. I also have to recognize my privilege as an able-bodied man. I have never in my entire life had to look at my wife on the way into the store as I'm pulling into the parking spot and say, can you spot the nearest handicap spot for me? I've never had to do that.
Yeah, right.
I've never had to ask someone to open the door for me as I will myself. I've never had a physical or mental illness. So understanding that we all have some level of privilege, but privilege varies in degrees. So while I may have able-bodied privilege, I don't have white privilege. I'm an able-bodied black man. In many ways, that still makes me a threat. That makes me an even greater threat. So understanding the intersection of privilege and targets, but understanding also how we can use our privileges for good. And so as a Christian, cisgendered, able-bodied male who's the director of campus inclusion at a community college, I have to use all of those privileges to deconstruct systems of inequity and then construct systems of equity. That's equity. Deconstructing systems of inequity and then constructing more equitable systems. It is not just the deconstruction of equity. It is the construction of systems that work for all of us. And that's how I would say we can use our privilege for good.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, word. So thank you, bro, man. I can't express my appreciation, man. We've been down for so long, and I just love, the way in which you're using your platform, at this point in time. Keep using it, man. Even after the media cycle leaves us, even after people have turned the station, keep using this platform for social justice. Keep infusing it into your message, because we don't want this to leave as soon as the people move on. There's a difference between moving forward and moving on. And a lot of times people don't want to move forward. They just want to move on. Right. So my admonishment to you as a brother is to move forward. Don't just move on from this moment. Move forward.
I hear you. I will. And if you catch me slipping, I hope that as a friend, a friend's job to call each other out when we see each other slipping. And so I hope that you will call me out. You have always made me better, and I know that Same. We are friends. We are still friends for that reason. And brothers. So, yes, we are brothers for that reason. Yeah. So thank you for sure. I'll end on this quote from Britt just to make you uncomfortable. And I agree that Mr. Rick Daniels is an incredible leader. So
Brady Fryberg, what up? Rock Valley fam. Yeah. Appreciate that. I love you, bro, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I thank everybody who rocked with us for 2 hours. I didn't even feel like it's been that long, but man, it's been an amazing thing. And keep doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. You keep doing what you're doing, and I hope this got you fired up to get some more microphones in front of your face. So I appreciate
we'll see, man.
You.
I'll get back out there one day, bro. But thank you, bro. I appreciate you, man, yes. And I love, man. Keep going. Keep moving forward.
Much love to you, man. Thank you. All right. You take care, brother.
All right, you too,
everybody.
Bro.
Appreciate y'all so much for tuning in. This was another powerful episode of Diner Talks with James. It was so exciting to have you all here. What a powerful conversation. What a privilege it is to get to have that conversation and to be able to learn from someone who donated their time in the midst of everything that's going on in their country, just to educate. So thank you to Rick Daniels. Thank you to all of you for your presence, for your questions, for your willingness to stay uncomfortable, hear things that maybe didn't sound too good, but yet you stuck with it. And just as Rick charged me, I will charge you to keep putting in the work, because work is in fact the only thing that is going to change this. And the thing is about change is that everybody loves the idea of change until they got to do something about it. It's one of my favorite quotes from Norman Sellers. And the dirty secret about change is that it's a synonym for work. But that's where things get hairy for people. That's where things get hairy. So keep putting in the work, because in fact, change equals work. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you next week on the next episode of Diner Talks with James.